Good afternoon, and welcome to the Video Programming and Accessibility Forum on Online Closed Captioning, hosted by the Media Bureau and the Consumer and Governmental Affairs Bureau. I am Michelle Carey, Chief of the Media Bureau. I would like to thank my colleagues in both bureaus for working so hard to put together this forum, which undoubtedly will be very informative. I would also like to thank all the panelists for agreeing to participate and spending your time with us today. It is hard to believe that it's been 11 years since the passage of the landmark Communications and Video Accessibility Act of 2010. And it has been 11 years since the Commission first adopted regulations governing online closed captioning. A lot has changed in that time. Consumers today view an increasing volume of video programming online from even more sources than we could have contemplated a decade ago. While much of that content is available online with closed captions, a significant portion of it falls outside the Commission's current rules. Today, we're going to hear from panelists that represent the broadcast and cable television industries, online video programming distributors, academics, and consumer advocates. They will discuss the current status of online video programming, and we will look forward to the future developments in online closed captioning. Before we get started, I would like to introduce FCC Chairwoman Jessica Rosenworcel for opening remarks.
Thank you, Michelle, and good afternoon to everyone, and welcome to the FCC's Video Programming and Accessibility Forum. Thank you all for being here and joining us. More importantly, thank you to the experts and advocates out there for your work to harness the power of communications technology to improve the lives of people with disabilities. Now, as many of you know, my interest in these issues long predates my appointment here as FCC Chairwoman. In fact, it actually predates my arrival at the Commission some years ago. Because back when I served as counsel to the Senate Commerce Committee, I had the great privilege of working on the 21st Century Communications and Video Accessibility Act, which at the FCC, we affectionately known as the CVAA. I was actually in the room, deep in the audience, like in the last row, when President Obama signed this landmark legislation into law. When I say this is one of the proudest moments of my professional life, I have the receipts to prove it. Right outside the entry to my office at the FCC, I actually had on the wall a signed copy of the CVAA. I wanted people to see it because I wanted to remind people who came in and visited my office that we can, in fact, do big things. Now, as a commissioner, I had the unique opportunity to help craft the rules implementing the law I helped write. And over the past decade or so, the FCC has adopted many rules to improve access to video programming, including rules to improve the accuracy of captioning, expand captioning for some online video, and support access to audio description, which makes video accessible to individuals who are blind and visually impaired. Now, while the FCC, I think, has met its statutory obligations generally under the CVAA, it really doesn't mean that our work is done. In the internet age, the video marketplace is constantly evolving. And the FCC's policies, and our laws too, are going to need to keep pace with these changes. Now, given the changes in technology and industry practices across the media landscape since the adoption of this law, back in April, I launched an inquiry to look at how the FCC is fulfilling its obligations under the CVAA. And we asked for comment on whether any updates are needed to the rules the FCC has, or even as we think bigger, to the legislation itself. One of the ideas that came out of the responses that we received, and we received a lot of them, was that it would be helpful to bring key stakeholders together to explore the state of closed captioning availability for online video programming and discuss ways to enhance accessibility. And here we are. We've got a great program lined up for you today. And next, you're going to hear from Senator Ed Markey, who will be delivering our keynote remarks. He was a member of the House of Representatives when the CVAA was in Congress, but more than that, He was a great champion of this legislation, and it would not be the law of the land today without his absolutely fierce efforts to make it happen. We've got 2 panel discussions lined up with experts from traditional media companies, online video providers, and consumer groups. Our first group will talk about best practices for online closed captioning and the technical issues we may need to overcome. The second team will focus on what the FCC can and should be doing to improve captioning under the existing law. And thanks to all of the panelists who have taken the time to be with us today, I look forward to an enlightening and engaging back and forth. Thanks also to the FCC staff who have helped pull this event together. As always, I am grateful for everything you do. So here's to a great forum and to a digital future that is accessible to all. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairwoman Rosenworcel. As the chairwoman said, we are fortunate to have video remarks from U.S. Senator from Massachusetts, Edward Markey. And as you know, he has been a longtime advocate of the importance of ensuring that individuals with disabilities are fully able to utilize modern communication services. In fact, he authored the CVAA in 2010, which, as you know, among other things, gave the commission authority to regulate online closed captioning. We are thrilled that Senator Markey has agreed to participate in today's event. Here is Senator Markey's remarks.
Hi, everyone. I'm Ed Markey, Senator from Massachusetts. And while I wish that we could be together today in person, I am delighted to virtually participate in this Federal Communications Commission Accessibility Forum. And I want to thank Chairwoman Rosenworcel for the invitation, as well as for her strong leadership on making technology more accessible to everyone. The all-star lineup of participants the FCC has assembled for today's event is also a remarkable group of leaders who reflect the diversity of the communities that we all serve. Throughout my time in Congress, I have been committed to the principles of opportunity, independence, and equal access for everyone. I believe that no one should be left behind and that technology must be accessible to everyone. At its core, accessibility is about participation, and each of us should have the ability to participate in society to the greatest extent that our talents and our abilities permit. And that's why I have led a series of legislative initiatives aimed at broadening access to technologies that can help individuals with disabilities do things that most Americans just take for granted. In 1982, I worked to pass the Telecommunications Act for the disabled. That law requires essential telephones defined at the time by the FCC as workplace telephones used by persons with hearing aids, emergency phones, and coin-operated phones to be hearing aid compatible. In 1988, I worked to pass the Hearing Aid Compatibility Act, which required that most telephone manufacturers, as they're making these phones, or as those phones are imported into the United States, that they be compatible with hearing aids. And that same year, I also passed, as the chairman of the Telecommunications Committee, the Telecommunications Accessibility Enhancement Act, a law that required the government to ensure that communications with and within the federal agencies were accessible to people with hearing and speech disabilities. Then, in 1990, Congress passed the landmark Americans with Disabilities Act. And that remarkable legislation required accommodations for individuals with disabilities, including interpreters, readers, and devices so that people can participate in employment and public accommodations. As chairman of the Telecommunications Subcommittee, I made sure that the ADA also established a nationwide telecommunications relay service. But that's not all we did. In the same year, I also passed another bill, the Television Decoder Circuitry Act, which mandated that televisions had the functionality to provide closed captioning so that anyone who is deaf or hard of hearing can enjoy the same entertainment and programming as other Americans. So when you see closed captioning across the bottom of your television screen, that was my law in 1990, the Television Dakota Circuitry Act, which just is a fancy way of saying that every TV set has closed captioning and that the deaf and the blind and everyone else who just wants to turn down the sound, maybe even and look at the closed captioning, can take advantage of that technology. Then, in 1996, we passed another law that I authored, the Telecommunications Act. And that enormous legislation went beyond requiring that TVs be capable of displaying closed captions to actually requiring programmers to provide closed captions on their shows. The 1996 Act also required that all telecommunications services and equipment be usable by persons with disabilities. Then, in 2010, I was proud to write a capstone law that represents the culmination of all of these efforts. The 21st Century Communications and Video Accessibility Act, or the CVAA. By 2010, we had moved a long way from the black rotary dial phones of 1982. We had now moved to the wireless era. And just like the ADA mandated physical ramps into buildings, the CVAA, which I authored, required online ramps to the internet so that individuals with disabilities can access the web from wherever they happen to be. And that law requires that smartphones, tablets, set-top boxes, and the universe of apps and devices and services still in the mind of some 15-year-old whiz kid are designed with accessibility in the first place, not added sometime after the fact. No, let's just from the beginning say all of these technologies are accessible. And that law also expanded access to closed captioning and audio descriptions for video, which ensured that everyone can receive life-saving emergency information. Passing that legislation in 2010, standing over the shoulder of President Obama as he signed it, standing next to Stevie Wonder as we looked over President Obama's shoulder as he signed that law. It was truly a revolutionary moment, and it remains one of my proudest achievements. And I also know that work remains to be done. Our communications technologies have continued to evolve since we passed the CVAA, and the coronavirus pandemic has highlighted the challenges too many individuals still face in obtaining equal access. In particular, it is clear that we must expand access to closed captioning in the online video and streaming marketplace, as well as promoting consistency in captioning content across video platforms. And we also need to take a serious look at complex accessibility issues related to user-generated online content and video conferencing service. As the world has moved from a television and cable model to an online model, we have to move all of those technologies that provide accessibility for everyone over there as well. Now, not all of those challenges will be resolved today, but I'm confident that the leadership of everyone here will help us continue to expand the circle of inclusion. And as the world continues to change with new technologies and services, we have to remember that it's never intrinsically for the better or for the worse. New technologies are only good when we animate them with the human values that we all share, like equal opportunity and access for everyone. That reflects the best of what we are as a society, and we have to build it into every single technology. Today's Accessibility Forum is an important reaffirmation of those principles, and I look forward to continuing to work with everyone here. This job is really never completed fully. As technologies are developed and deployed, we have work to do to make sure that they are accessible to everyone. So I want to thank each and every one of you for all of the work which you are doing, and I look forward to partnering with you to ensure that we have a brighter future for everyone in our society.
Thank you, Chairman Senator Markey. What a wonderful way to set the stage for today's forum. Next, I would like to introduce Hillary Negro, who is the Media Bureau's Deputy Bureau Chief, and she will set forth today's agenda. Hillary.
Thanks, Michelle. Welcome, everyone. We're pleased to have you join us for this discussion today. I'm going to tell you what to expect from the rest of the program this afternoon. In order to set the stage for the discussion, it's helpful to understand the content and the breadth of the FCC's rules. We're going to provide you with an overview of the relevant FCC rules governing closed captioning of video programming that's delivered by IP. After that, we'll get into the bulk of today's forum, which will consist of two panels of stakeholders with various experiences and perspectives. They'll describe their work, the current landscape, and discuss the issues in more depth. The first panel will consider technical and business issues surrounding online closed captioning. They'll consider the consumer experience and best practices that could enhance the availability of online closed captioning. The second panel will examine the role of the FCC, including the scope of the FCC's authority and ways to fill the gaps in current online closed captioning requirements. Although it's not possible for us all to be together in person today, we want to engage with those of you that are watching online. You can submit questions for the panelists by email. During the forum, you can submit those questions to livequestions@fcc.gov. That's live questions, no spaces, @fcc.gov. Please indicate in the subject line whether you're addressing your question to panel A or panel B. We may not be able to get to all of the questions, but we'll do our best. As a reminder, the online closed captioning proceeding is permit but disclose under the Commission's ex parte rules. The separate docket, which we released the PN asking for comment on the Commission's fulfillment of the CVAA, is also permit but disclose. So today's forum is being recorded, and a link to that recording will be made available in each of those dockets. So now I'm going to turn the floor over to Susie Rosen-Singleton, who is Chief of our Consumer and Governmental Affairs Bureau's Disability Rights Office. She's going to go over the relevant rules for us. And after that, we'll begin the first panel shortly before 1:30. Then we'll take a short 5-minute break and begin our second panel at approximately 2:40. So over to you, Susie.
Thank you so much, Hillary. I think that we can pull up the slides. I will be sharing a general overview of the Commission's rules about closed captioning of video programming that is being streamed over the internet or internet protocol. Next slide, please. And we're going to start out by talking about the general requirements, but I did also want to drive home, as you heard from Senator Markey and others earlier, the 21st Century Communications and Video Accessibility Act, or CVAA, established the parameters of these requirements. So we at the FCC have codified that law into our rules. And Title 47, Part 79.4 in specific in the Code of Federal Regulations. So that rule states that full-length video programming that has previously been shown on television with captioning in the United States must be captioned when it is delivered over Internet Protocol. So in other words, the captioning rules do not apply to full-length programming that has only ever been streamed online. As for quality of those captions, the internet provided captions must be of at least the same quality as what had previously been shown on television for the same program. Online consumer-generated programming is generally not required to be captioned unless it is previously shown on television with captions. Next slide, please. Now, specifically to video clips, which refers to taking a specific segment of an otherwise full-length video program, there are some more nuanced requirements in this particular area. Video clips of captioned full-length programming must be captioned if posted on the video programming distributor's own website or app. So in other words, this rule does not apply to video clips that are posted on third-party websites or apps. And just to provide a concrete example of this, if you are watching something on CNN and that clip is subsequently shown on CNN's website, it must be captioned, but not if it is being shown on a third-party website like YouTube, for example. I do want to emphasize that this is very different from the requirement for full-length programming. Full-length programming does not matter where it is being displayed. It is covered by our rules if it was previously shown on television with captions. This rule has to do with what are called straight lift clips, meaning clips that have the same audio and video as has been previously shown with captions on television directly pulled out. Montage clips refers to an edited sequence of several different straight lift clips that are then pulled together into one segment. That's called a montage. There are also then live and or near live video clips. Live video clips are considered clips of programming that was shown substantively simultaneous to its being created, right, or being aired on television. Near live is within 24 hours of its recording and having been shown. So those are those definitions. And there are grace periods allowed for both live and near live programming to be captioned online. That is a 12-hour delay that is permissible for these clips to be captioned and those captions to be added to the online content, and 8 hours, which is permitted for near live clips. Next slide, please. For archived internet programming, the distributors have 15 days to add captions to full-length video programming that has already been shown on the internet and is subsequently shown on television with captioning. This requirement used to be 45 days and has now shrunk down to be 15 days for current purposes. Next slide, please. This is the final slide, and probably one of the most important slides because it's really no use in having captions if captions are not accessible, if the captions are too small to be readable, if the color does not work for you or what have you. So we do have rules around how you turn on and activate captioning and how you can customize the captioning display settings. Covered providers must include a simple and easy to use method for activating the captioning that is reasonably comparable to a button, key, or icon. And that rule is codified in 47 Code of Federal Regulations, section 79.109. Finally, covered providers must make 10 different features customizable by the viewer. And they're listed here, and I'll go through them for you. Presentation of the captions, which can refer to whether the captions roll up or pop on, amongst other things. Character color, and the character here refers to the text, must have at least 8 different options for color of the text. Character opacity, being able to adjust the transparency of the text itself. Character size, which of course can move from about 50% of its original size to 200% of its original size. And can also be picked from 8 different font styles. There's also background color and background opacity. Character edge attributes as well. And then the captioning window color. And if available, language choices, language options. Sometimes you have the ability to change into either simplified language or another spoken language, and so you may be able to adjust that for the captioning. And then must also offer preview and setting retention. Again, this is all in 79.103. This PowerPoint has a wealth of information. If you would like to make use of this at some point, you can find this on the events page for this event. You can also visit the FCC's website, and specifically DRO at fcc.gov/accessibility. Thank you so much, and I will turn the floor back over to Hillary.
Thank you so much, Susie, for that very helpful overview of the relevant rules. And as she said, that will be useful to people in the future on our website. Next, I'd like to introduce Elliot Greenwald, who is going to moderate our first panel. He is Deputy Chair of the Consumer and Governmental Affairs, Deputy Chief of the Consumer and Governmental Affairs Bureau's Disability Rights Office. And the first panel is going to focus on the technical and business issues surrounding online closed captioning. Over to you, Elliot.
Thank you, Hillary. This is Elliot Greenwald, Deputy Chief of the Disability Rights Office. In that role, I work on a number of the rulemaking proceedings that the Disability Rights Office is always working on, and other orders that are issued from the Disability Rights Office. I'm also the point person for TRS issues within the Disability Rights Office, along with a number of other staff persons who work with staff attorneys and others who work on TRS matters. I'll be the moderator of the forum's first panel, which will discuss technical and business issues surrounding online closed captioning. We have a distinguished panel of experts from the television industry, streaming video services, and the communication technology research field. We recognize that several panelists here, Prime Video, Netflix, and NBC Universal, have captioned all or almost all of their online full-length streaming content, and that Google has added tools to enable captioning of video content. We look forward to hearing their discussion of best practices and business issues on online captioning. To the people watching this, I'll remind you, as Hillary mentioned, that you can submit questions via email to livequestions@fcc.gov. So please do so soon. Now, what I'll do is I'm going to ask the first question and then introduce the panelists one at a time when it's their turn to address that first question. So the first question is, please introduce yourself and your organization, and please describe your organization's involvement and efforts to ensure closed captioning of online video content. I'm giving each panelist 3 minutes for this question, and we'll start with Heather Dowdy, Director of Accessibility for Netflix.
Thank you. Hello, I'm Heather Dowdy. As way of a visual description, I'm a brown-skinned Black woman with chin-length hair, wearing a bright orange top and tan blazer. It's such a pleasure to join this panel on video programming today, because I can personally remember witnessing the value of what we're discussing. Growing up as a CODA with deaf and hard of hearing parents, closed captions was constantly on at our house. And I bring this experience with me as the Director of Accessibility at Netflix, where I'm focused on leveraging technology to connect people with disabilities to their next favorite story, while also improving usability for everyone along the way. At Netflix, we are passionate about entertainment and storytelling, and we believe that art can help build empathy and understanding and reduce prejudice as a window towards a more inclusive society. And so that's why we strive to have diversity and inclusion, representation, both on and behind the camera. And we serve a diverse member base across gender, ethnicity, sexual orientation, and disabilities. So we understand that accessibility is just as important as aesthetics and speed and stability. And that's why we offer features like assistive listening system support, brightness controls, keyboard shortcuts, and compatibility with screen readers and voice commands. Particularly when it comes to video programming, we are continually expanding our catalog of titles with both subtitles for the deaf and hard of hearing, also known as closed captions, and audio description for people with vision disabilities. Most recently, the American Council for the Blind presented Netflix with the Game Changer Award for our work in audio description. And I love the name of that award because as pioneers in streaming, Netflix is proud to have made entertainment more accessible than before. And we also know that there's more to be done. I'm excited for what the future of storytelling holds for us at Netflix and us as a society, in the name of new technology and innovations that will allow for new and more ways for accessible design. And so we continue to be committed to working with the disability community and working within our industry and other policymakers to deliver more inclusive and accessible entertainment to the world.
Thank you, Heather. Next up is Karin Liu, Head of Brand Accessibility at Google.
Hi, everyone. My name is Karin Liu. My pronouns are she and her. A visual description of myself. I am a white female who identifies as a lesbian. I have short blonde hair and I'm wearing a black turtleneck. I'm currently the head of brand accessibility at Google. My role is to really bring a disabled lens into not only the product and innovation that Google had been committed to for decades around accessibility and making experiences and tools accessible to people with disabilities, but also thinking about representation and how people with disabilities are authentically represented in the stories we tell and the innovation that we create and bringing those voices and perspectives to the table. I'm proud to say I am, as a severely hard of hearing person, that Google had brought me along not only before I came to Google as a member of a community and an advocate for the deaf and hard of hearing to help better our innovation around technologies like live captioning, live transcribe, and allowing better closed captioning within our video content, but also representation of who we are and what we represent in the stories we tell. I'm super proud to be here and grateful for this panel and this discussion, as we at Google believe that the evolution and the changes in how people are experiencing online content to allow them to see themselves in the stories that we tell and the product that we create. And I'm excited to think about the future of digital innovation and storytelling and how we can come together to make sure that everyone can experience the messages and the innovation that we all are here to help better and make sure everyone is included. So thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Thank you, KR. Next is Daniel Kazmarek, General Manager, Global Video Supply Chain and Content Operations at Prime Video.
Thank you to the chairwoman and members of the commission for inviting me to the panel. My name is Daniel Kazmarek. I'm General Manager of Global Video Supply Chain and Content Operations with Prime Video. For a visual description, I'm a man in my mid-30s wearing a blue shirt and black jacket with glasses and a large headset on top of a bald head. Prime Video is a global video service offering customers a vast collection of movies, series, and sports available to watch on hundreds of compatible devices. Our content includes Amazon originals such as The Wheel of Time, licensed content from third-party studios, and live sports such as Thursday Night Football, all available at no additional cost to Prime members. Prime Video also offers movies and series available to rent or buy, including new theatrical releases and more than 100 channel subscriptions. Combined, Prime Video offers hundreds of thousands of movies and television episodes to US customers. As a global video service, we serve a diverse set of customers with unique content, language, connectivity, and accessibility needs. We innovate across all of these dimensions in our effort to provide the world's best digital experience. Specific to closed captions, we work directly with Amazon Studios, as well as third-party content providers and distributors of all sizes to ensure the availability of closed captions on our service. We also work directly with industry-leading caption and localization service providers to procure closed captions in the event our studio partners do not have closed captions. Prime Video also consults and collaborates with content providers and industry experts on technology that simplifies the creation and improves the quality of closed captions. For example, over the past few years, Prime Video has built a number of automated detectors and human-led workflows that detect and correct closed caption defects. These include defects such as captions being out of sync, missing caption blocks, spelling mistakes, and reading speed or line count violation. Our work to expand the availability and quality of closed captions extends beyond English in the United States, as we apply our learnings and technologies from our work in the US to many other territories and language. Finally, I'd like to note that these principles and our accessibility ambitions also extend to audio descriptions. Since 2018, we have worked to increase the availability of audio described titles on Prime Video more than 20-fold. As per the American Council of the Blind's Audio Description Project, Prime Video offering of more than 3,000 audio described movies and television series is currently the largest among US-based OTT streaming services. More than half of these new audio description tracks were created via a new process we developed internally within Prime Video, where we combined an in-house time text editor with AWS's Polly service, the speech engine behind Alexa, to dramatically simplify audio description creation. Prime Video is committed to partnering across the industry to enable greater availability and quality of closed captions for online video content. Again, I'd like to thank the committee for the invitation and look forward to the rest of your questions.
Okay, thank you, Daniel. Next is Dr. Christian Vogler, Director of the Technology Access Program at Gallaudet University.
Hello, everyone. I am Dr. Christian Vogler. Sorry, 1 second. My white balance got disrupted, so apologies for that. So yes, I, as a visual description, I am a white man with relatively short brown hair, getting a little more gray in it by the day. I also have an assisted listening device that's silver that's hanging around my neck, wearing a purple shirt. So I am the director of the Technology Access Program at Gallaudet University. This is a research group that focuses on communication and access technology for people who are deaf or hard of hearing, including closed captioning, of course. My role here is as a researcher in terms of how we can improve closed captioning, and along those lines, I'm currently leading a 5-year research project funded by grant on closed captioning metrics. That is, how do you measure the quality of closed captioning, and pursuant to that, how can we improve the user experience and the usability of closed captions? That project is in collaboration with 3 different institutions, of course, Gallaudet University, the Rochester Institute of Technology, and a company called AppTech. The reason why we implemented this research project is that Gallaudet University was able to identify that the prevalence of closed captioning was increasing, but the technical aspects of captioning quality were not improving necessarily, and the technology has not advanced much since the 1980s. From the consumer's perspective. And at that time, we're talking about your old cathode ray tube TVs, your CRT TV. And so we have replaced those since then with digital TVs, and we have added internet connected equipment and computers and tablets and phones and wireless devices. There are so many opportunities to provide access to more different types of accessibility and feature sets. But although the technology has evolved, the captioning has not evolved to keep pace. So we're very excited to see the FCC convene this meeting so that we can talk through what opportunities we can leverage to improve the quality of closed captioning. And thank you.
Thank you, Christian. Next is Jim Denney, Executive Vice President and Chief Product Officer, Direct to Consumer with NBC Universal.
Right. Oh yeah, thanks for introducing me and thanks for having me today. My name is Jim Denney. I'm the Chief Product Officer and for NBC Universal's direct-to-consumer products. For visual description, I'm a white male wearing glasses, short brown hair, hopefully not too gray hair, and blue shirt. NBC Universal's direct-to-consumer properties include Peacock, Fandango, Vudu, Rotten Tomatoes, NBC.com, and our cable network applications and websites. I'll focus on Peacock specifically. Peacock is a mix of original programming and programming that has previously been exhibited. So content that has been exhibited previously and content that is original and new to Peacock alone. In terms of closed captioning, our efforts around closed captioning, I'll look at this by content type. Previously exhibited programming that shows up on the platforms, all programming that has been exhibited on broadcast and cable comes with captions per the existing rules. So that is covered with captions. Original programming, all original programming or acquired programming that comes from Peacock also is captioned before it comes to Peacock. We handle that through contractual obligations and policy in terms of production of content for Peacock as a tool or as a platform. There's sports and news. Peacock has sports and news programming, including live programming. The sports and news programming may come from the NBC network with captions, or it may be original to Peacock. That original programming is also captioned before it's exhibited on Peacock. And lastly, programming on NBC.com and its cable network sites. Those applications generally have content that have been exhibited on broadcast or cable with captions as required by the FCC. So they are usually covered with captions. That programming, when it's exhibited in its digital form, is also covered with closed captioning. I want to thank you for the opportunity to be here today and to speak on this panel. Look forward to the conversation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Jim. We are now going to turn to our next question, which I'm directing at Christian. And the question is, what are some of the challenges consumers may currently face in accessing and viewing online closed captioning?
This is Christian speaking. Thank you. So there are a whole host of challenges, really a great many. For example, consumers, of course, have a variety of different experiences depending on what kind of device or software they are using. There's such diversity there. In that some software, for example, does a fairly good job in terms of closed captioning, translating size, color, and what have you, whereas other equipment can really struggle with some of those aspects of it. The adjustments don't work very well, that it, in the end, makes it more difficult to read and understand. Another example of a challenge is closed captioning quality varies greatly depending on where the captioning is coming from. I'll provide you an example. Closed captioning that was generated for TV and is later put online versus having consumer generated content. If you're watching some video on YouTube or Vimeo or anything there, you have a very variable experience, and we are seeing an increase in closed captioning, but we never could have predicted whether the closed captioning would be good enough for consumers to actually make use of it when viewing the content. I also want to mention the FCC does have rules for activating the closed captioning, that is turning it on with something like a button. But unfortunately, I have recently seen very often what is provided is not really in accordance with that rule. I've seen some recent examples wherein providers have effectively hidden the closed captioning option under a nested menu several layers deep. And I am not certain whether that was an intentional ignorance of the FCC's rule. There is a great diversity of online content here, and some of which does adhere to the rules and ensuring that it is easily accessible to consumers. But we need to ensure that consumers have easy access to that option. Otherwise, there are going to be more challenges. From a more technical point of view, I see a few different issues here that may impact the entire user experience. The first one is software support for closed captioning online is so diverse in its implementation. An example in web browsers. Yes, implementation in various web browsers. There is a technical standard that was developed a decade ago. But if one attempts to test whether various browsers are in adherence to that standard, you'll find millions of bugs, which ultimately means that content providers are typically relying on a third-party library. And some of those third-party libraries are great and others are not so great. And so that can ultimately have a downstream effect on the consumer experience. Another thing that I have seen is that computer software on newer televisions and mobile devices have a lot of powerful and cool technology, but it seems like a lot of the captioning workflows are still tied to the television. I remember during the introduction, I mentioned that we're working on the workflows that were developed in 1980 and 1990, which means we're talking about 30 or 40-year-old workflows. And I'm certain that there's great potential for innovation there in making the captioning look better and read better and be easier to use and improve the information that is being provided about background noise, music, emotion, things that we're not getting anything of. But the closed captioning workflows that are in existence today are still very much tied to broadcast television. So the challenge for all of us on the panel here today, and for the panel, for folks who are watching us online, is how can we innovate with online captioning to finally give the deaf and hard of hearing community what we really need? Thank you.
Thank you, Christian. The next question will be directed at Heather, KR, Daniel, and Jim, which is, in some cases, captions may not be available for online programming, such as full-length programming not previously captioned for airing on television. Can you discuss recommended best practices to enhance closed captioning of these full-length video programs that appear on streaming video services, especially when programming is distributed through various licensing deals and online distribution agreements? And so, Heather, please start.
All Netflix films and series support closed captioning in the language that they were originally produced as a standard best practice. And so closed captioning is available in that original language. So if it's in German, so that means German for German titles or English for US and UK titles. We also are increasing the number of titles also in other languages, in addition to subtitled translations. Because Netflix is a global entertainment service in over 190 countries, We understand that it's important to have a focus in ensuring that closed captions is available more broadly in local languages around the world. We also work with licensees and broadcasters, but understand that our partners may be at different points in their accessibility journey, and sometimes the captioning files are not available at the time. But overall, movies and series will either have subtitles or closed captions, where closed captions includes the additional audio information on the screen. And so it's highly possible and increasingly becoming more popular that we will have both subtitles and closed captioning for the same title in the same language. But what's really important is the progress that we're making in closed captioning. We are continually expanding our catalog of accessible titles that includes both providing programs with subtitles and closed captioning, but also includes audio description for members who are blind and have low vision. And to the point made earlier, discoverability is really important. As we continue to expand our catalog, being able to easily enable closed captions is important. And so that's why when members are viewing a title, they can enable closed captions and select it just by clicking on the audio and subtitles logo right there while viewing the title. So as we look to continue to expand our catalog and what we offer to our members who view closed captioning on titles, we also think about ways in which we need to do this in a way that serves all of our members across many different languages. Thank you.
Thank you, Heather. KR?
When it comes to captioning, closed captioning, the innovation that Google has created and thinking of how the user is experiencing video or how they are wanting to experience video, often sometimes there isn't a captioning option. So what we have done is, one, we have a standard practice in any of our content that we produce as Google to make sure that closed captioning is integrated into our content. But what's also important is to think of ways that our innovation can help someone in the moment get access to captions quickly. Tools like Live Caption that we've created, where in the browser we have Chrome extensions that allow you to have captioning real time, and it's no replacement for human generated captions, but it gives someone the ability to caption and experience what is happening in real time so that they can access the communication that's being given. Also, we have tools in YouTube that allow creators to integrate captioning into their content. And more that is becoming a standard and important practice that we educate our creators on incorporating and the importance of that. More and more, we're seeing captioning being burned in to make sure that, and again, burned-in captions can't be turned on and off. So making sure that there's always on captions in content that we create so that no matter what, you can see the captioning. And that's really important too to think about, is how do we standardize captioning all the time, right? Captioning is becoming more and more of a mainstream tool that even people who are not deaf and hard of hearing are utilizing. Your spouse could be sleeping next to you and you want to watch content on your phone, or you want to watch content on TV, you're able to turn on closed captioning. So we need to think about the larger user experience and how we think about incorporating those. And Google is very, very committed to looking at our innovation and improving our tools and making sure more accuracy. And we include the community in that process and work very closely with different partners. The other thing to think about is the things that we have done this year in working with our network partners when it comes to live events. We partnered with ABC during the Oscars to make sure that closed captioning and audio descriptions were available for the Oscars. Along with TNT, we partnered with them during the NBA championships to provide closed captioning during the live event of the NBA game. So there are ways that we can come together and utilize each other's technologies and platforms to better provide access for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, KR. Daniel, you're next.
Thank you. So I think the most important thing is first deciding accessibility as a priority as an organization. And at Prime Video, we've implemented end-to-end programs for both closed captions and audio descriptions to ensure the availability and quality of these for customers. In terms of specific best practices, it starts with how we make and license content. For years, Amazon Studios committed that 100% of their English language originals have closed captions and audio descriptions available. We've also made it the default position in our licensing agreements with third-party content providers that they're required to deliver closed captions in the original voice language of their content. This includes the expectation that they create closed captions in the event that closed captions were previously not available for broadcast. In rare cases where closed captions were not available nor required, Prime Video will often partner with third-party services to create closed captions at our own expense. Then, as we execute these agreements, we have a number of human and systemic validations built to ensure the availability, but also, as Dr. Vogler mentioned, the quality of closed captions on our service. We leverage internal technology and operational capabilities to fix defective captions ourselves when possible, or request studios redeliver corrected assets. When we do fix our assets internally, we also go back and notify studios of the corrections we've made so that they can correct the source assets they have that can then be used on other services. Our data indicates that the programs and mechanisms we put in place to enhance closed caption availability has worked for our US customers. In the past 3 years, more than 99% of all streaming sessions on Prime Video in the US have had English language closed caption options available. Similarly, in 2021, more than 79% of US streams on Spanish language content has Spanish closed captions available. This has improved from only 18% in 2019 and includes 100% availability of closed captions on Spanish language Amazon original content. Despite these results, we continue to collaborate with Amazon Studios and our third-party content providers and industry stakeholders to increase the availability and quality of closed captions and audio descriptions globally. We believe Prime Video content is for everyone, and we continue to make our content accessible. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Daniel. And next we have Jim.
Great, thank you, Elliot. I'm going to build on some of the previous comments that were made. Going back to Dr. Vogler's comment about availability or just access, or being able to allow users to access closed captioning in the first place. We agree that we want to make it as simple as possible for the user. We want to make sure that that capability is not hidden any place in the UI. So we make closed captioning available in a simple form on the player itself, so that as you're watching any given piece of content, you can turn captions on and off. I think that there's certainly other things that we are planning and will do in the first place, but first and foremost, we want to make it easy for people to access these capabilities. Answering the question about best practices for this question in particular, I'm going to echo some of the things that Daniel just referenced. We use contractual tools to make sure that content that we're licensing, long form content that we're licensing, contains closed captioning, whether it originated for broadcast or cable distribution or not. So we use that as a primary tool to make sure that our content on the platforms does have closed captioning. And that includes English and Spanish language captions if the original programming was in Spanish as well. So we're building off that same structure, using business relationships to ensure that closed captioning is available. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Our next question is for Heather, KR, Daniel, and Christian. And I'm going to mix up the order a little bit and start with Daniel this time.
Great, thanks. And Elliot, did you want to read the question first?
My apologies. Activating and customizing captions for streaming video differ widely across devices and between applications. What are some recommended best practices for ensuring that captioned streaming video can be viewed with easily customized captions on different devices and apps? Are there challenges to providing a standardized interface for activating and customizing captions? Now, Daniel, you're on.
Great, thank you. So beyond the quality of the captions themselves, providing a good caption experience is primarily about discoverability and customization. As Dr. Vogler mentioned, it's important to make sure that caption settings are easy to find. On our homepage and title detail pages, we display prominently what captions and subtitle languages are available. Within the player, we also present a button to open the caption settings directly from the player UI. These caption settings allow a customer to view the available caption tracks and change tracks, as well as provide a way for customers to customize how their captions look. At the beginning of the proceeding, we talked about the various dimensions in which customers should be able to customize it, whether it's font size, text color, and background color. And Prime Video customers can create up to 4 different caption themes that they can save and use. Finally, to provide a simple and personalized experience, we allow customers to preview and retain these caption preferences so that when they come back for a new viewing session or select a different piece of content, we'll automatically start that stream with their preferred time, text, audio, language, or caption display settings. Then, to ensure a good captions experience across devices, we advocate for and adopt using standard file formats such as TTML2. This ensures that we're supporting an open standard that everyone can benefit from. And there are resources available for different device manufacturers and services to reference. And most partners are familiar with and use the format, and so we get great adoption across various services. Formats also allow content providers to specify styles and specific content, further improving the captions experience. For example, content providers might change the positioning of captions lines or add Ruby characters to help viewers understand the pronunciation of specific characters. 2 areas where we feel that there's a challenge is providing a standard interface are a lack of comprehensive test files and documentation for all caption use cases. The TTML2 spec, for example, has various examples to clarify various aspects of the spec, but in other areas lacks sufficient documentation and examples of less common use cases. With the huge amount of content and devices Prime Video supports, conducting regression testing can be a challenge as we look to enhance the features within our player and enable support for even more devices. To counteract this, we've worked closely with customers who rely on captions and use them frequently so we can understand their needs, and have built robust feedback mechanisms to detect and address customer pain points. We've also created a number of test content use cases internally so that we can conduct caption rendering and regression tests on different devices and apps. However, we feel it would be useful and beneficial and want to continue to contribute to additional industry standard documentation and test content that would help engineers navigate through all the edge cases and scenarios during development and testing.
Thank you, Daniel. And now KR is up next.
Thank you, Elliot. One of the important things that we have done, especially with our YouTube content, in a way that we allow you to customize your captions, making sure that you can edit it and add captions to your videos with no special software needed. So it's a built-in function of YouTube. And also the thing that's really important is we do walk through best practices, and we actually provide them as something publicly in our inclusive marketing guidelines, and talk about the best practices of captioning and subtitles and things to do and not to do to make sure that the experience is as accurate as possible. And the other thing that we ask creators, and that we even do internally, is thinking about like how to be as descriptive as possible, adding names, adding laughter, as Christian mentioned, making sure that people can really feel and understand the content and get the emotion out of it. But the other thing is to think about as a creator, how do you build time to make sure you're being thoughtful to build into your schedule and the content that you're getting ready to produce, to think about adding captions, to think about making audio described versions of your content, thinking about different languages and markets as well, and making sure that you're using localized subtitles, for example. Those are the things that are really important, and really being thoughtful in writing out your captions and subtitle and thinking of them as more of a screenplay, and having contextual clues, for example, are really helpful. So what we're thinking about is giving the creator, and even us at Google as content creators, the best practices to be really thoughtful in the content that we're creating. So, and that's what's really important, is to think about the experience you want to provide, and making sure that the emotion is coming across, and being more thorough, and not just having what's being spoken on the screen. We really want people to experience what's happening and feel the emotion. So those are really important factors in how we make sure that we're educating our creators on how to create the best content for captioning.
Thank you, KR. And Heather, it's your turn.
I love some of the points that have already been raised, so I will only just emphasize a few of them. As KR mentioned earlier, there are lots of people that we find that use closed captions. There's a good percentage of our members that watch titles on the Netflix service with closed captions and subtitles. So not just particularly people living with hearing disabilities. And so it's important, again, as we have all said, to make it easy to select subtitles and closed captionings within the service itself. At Netflix, we also have galleries for both subtitles as well as titles with audio description. And we understand that so many of our members are using these features and using them on different devices. And so within the Netflix user interface, we make sure that overall we are customizing and optimizing closed captions to work best on each and every device, whether a member is browsing a title on TV, on the web, within a mobile app, or a tablet. And our members are able to customize the captions, just like what's already been mentioned, with font style and color and shadow and size, in order to really meet their individual needs, which is really important here. And these settings can be changed and accessed whether the member is on the web or on mobile. And I'll also add that we continue to get feedback from our members that help us explore ways to improve these settings. And that member feedback is just always really important. Thank you.
Thank you, KR. And now for, I'm sorry, thank you, Heather. And now for Dr. Christian Vogler.
Hi, I'm Christian Vogler speaking. I wanted to chime in support of a couple points here. First, Daniel mentioned the importance of testing. And I would like to throw out there that I think it's an excellent idea. I think that it's critical to establish a common testing protocol across the industry. If you think about, for example, on the web, you already have the access guidelines under WCAG, WCAG. So for those guidelines, many people have already developed some testing protocols in terms of how to ensure that a web page is in compliance with the WCAG standards. So I would imagine a similar thing is possible in terms of the captioning industry and online video distributors, establishing a common testing protocol or number of protocols in order to verify that captions are in compliance and verify that customization of settings is implemented in such a way that it functions and is also in compliance. I would be very eager to see something like that. And I would encourage any and everyone to be part of implementing something like that so that we can see such a testing protocol become reality. I also wanted to mention the issue of a common experience and expectations in terms of how one makes changes to the interface. And again, I've seen this issue amongst so many different pieces of software that have all solved the same problem in a different way and creating a different looking app or user interface that contributes to a lot of confusion. I would say that I think that the responsibility is on the platform or the operating system. Like, for example, an operating system that already provides controls over the sound that is produced by the device. The operating system already has native support for captioning, but it seems like regardless of whatever the operating system makes available, the software developers are implementing their own solution to this problem. And I've seen this is worsening on embedded devices, embedded things. So I would encourage the industry to focus more on standard-based implementations for interfaces. The last thing that I will say, I wanted to mention what would be really nice would be if all of our representatives of various companies here, and I can only presume that everyone has been contacted with bugs about captioning or issues that consumers are having about captioning, or situations where the app is not respecting a user's individual settings for customization of the display. And to the extent that we see these bugs recur across industry players, that I would encourage all of you to draw some attention to that and try to develop processes that do not require the consumer to be the bug checker, the consumer to bring these issues to your attention, and that we catch them proactively. And with that, I'll say thank you.
Okay, thank you, Christian. The next question is for KR and Christian. And that is, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I think I skipped. I'm sorry. I skipped the question. The next question is for Jim. Many consumers enjoy viewing short clips of full-length programming. Please discuss the challenges of captioning video clips, including retaining captions for clips of closed programming, clips of captioned programming, adding captions to clips of programs without captions, and captioning of clips hosted on third-party websites. How can online providers overcome those challenges to expand the availability of captions on video clips? Can new technologies help, such as automated speech recognition?
Great. Thank you, Elliot. I'm going to speak specifically to content that is showing up on NBC Universal platforms for the most part. So I'll use our platforms as our examples. And as you pointed out, or as the question points out, clips short form does present challenges. Depending on the challenge, and the challenges they present depend on where the content originated and its content type. So I'll start with something simple. For previous content that's coming from previous full-length content, so clips of things that were previously full-length content. For the most part, those are captured, are closed captioned already. On our platform, they often originated from broadcast or cable, or as I mentioned before, in our agreements, our contractual agreements, we have them closed captioned. So usually for short form clips are not a problem if they originated from that type of content. Then there are promotional trailers. Because the FCC rules don't require pre-air promotion trailers or digital-only programming to be captioned, not all the pre-air or digital-only programming is closed captioned. So I'll break this down into two categories. From NBC Universal, for the most part, we try to make sure that those are covered. When clips or promotional content is coming from our own properties, such as Bravo or Oxygen, Peacock will work with those brands to make sure that that content receives closed captioning. For content that originates from other third parties, it's a best effort, and we try to cover as much as we can, but we look at it on a case-by-case basis. If the captions don't originate or didn't come with the originated content, we have to create those captions as we go. Peacock does ask that the content be delivered with captions, but there's not a contractual obligation in this case. When it's not captioned, as I said, we will make a case-by-case decision on whether we add captions or we don't add captions. For live linear clips, generally these are covered. So for example, Saturday Night Live, generally you're captioned in real time by humans. In this case, for short form clips that tend to have a long shelf life, and I'll contrast this with a different type of content in just a minute, we will actually go back and improve those closed captions. So as they become part of our VOD or the rest of our library, we'll go back and improve the captions that were set live and improve the quality of those after the fact. Then there's live original news and sports clips. These are typically captioned through ASR. These clips in particular tend to have very short shelf lives. For instance, they will be viewed mostly within the first 24 hours. This is in contrast with something like Saturday Night Live, which will tend to have a very long shelf life. So in this case, we use ASR to generate the original caption, and it's unlikely that we'll go back and make any corrections or improve it after the fact, because the viewership after its shelf life or after 24 hours tends to be very short. Another category, autoplay clips. These are the types of clips that usually play on the details page for a given piece of content. These are delivered differently than other types of content, and so they will often not have captions. And again, we'll look at a case-by-case basis on how to create captions. In terms of solutions, there are several solutions have been mentioned during this panel. There's of course the human creation of closed captioning, but in terms of scale, I think the most promising scale is ASR. ASR can be an effective tool to create captions in content that doesn't exist, in which the captions don't exist. It's not perfect. And as in my Saturday Night Live example, sometimes they will have to go back and be improved, but they can be applied more widely than the manual creation of captions, which allows it to scale. I think this technology also has the benefit of alignment with other applications in the industry. So ASR, the core technology around ASR, is also used for things like voice assistance in converting voice to text so that machines can comprehend and process language. And so the technology should improve and is aligned with other applications, which should help it improve over time. The second is making sure that we can leverage the improvements in those types of applications, in the speech to text for voice, for instance, and making sure that we can leverage those improvements in the creation of closed captioning, which isn't a given, but the industry will have to make a concerted effort to make sure that we can leverage those capabilities. So I think that ASR is one of our most promising tools in getting closed captioning into short form clips. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Jim. Now the next question is for KR and Christian, which is most consumer-generated videos, such as those shared through social media services, are not closed captioned. What tools have been or can be developed to caption those videos? And what are some best practices for captioning of these consumer-generated videos? And KR will go first.
This is KR. Actually, I think Christian wanted to add comments to Jim's statement, so I'm going to let Christian go first so he can reply to Jim.
Okay, this is Christian speaking. Thank you, KR. I did want to jump in and respond some to what Jim said, and I can also respond to that next question, then turn it back to you, KR, so I appreciate it. First, along the lines of what Jim shared, I wanted to make a comment here. I see there is still some issue with workflow. If in the past, a video had human-generated captions already, and was being passed around for the purpose of being clipped and then put on a web page, the not historically stay with the video, which would cause a tremendous problem. So the concept should eventually be that if a video that has audio and closed captions, if there's audio description, that should then be distributed and circulated as a package. If that is not what's happening, then I would encourage you to look at some kind of technology or technological standard or best practice for implementing a workflow to that effect. So with that in mind, I'll move forward to the next question about user-generated content. So some platforms do an excellent job at providing support for generating closed captioning. I mean, YouTube's a quintessential example of making it easy to implement closed captioning for user-generated content. TikTok does a similar thing in terms of making it easy for consumers to generate closed captioning of their own content, but unfortunately, there's no standardization as of yet. I think that there is some obligation on the part of the platforms, specifically the social media platforms, that to the extent that a video is being uploaded, closed captioning should by default be generated. So I see two important options that we need here. The first is support for ASR captioning, and further offering the option to the user to modify and improve that auto-generated captioning online. And then secondly, whatever tool is being used to edit the video, that tool needs to also support closed captioning implementations. I see many tools that from a consumer perspective are not natively supporting generating closed captioning. They do not support it right now. So if you want support for closed captioning, often the consumers have to either do a search for a third-party tool in order to add captions to that video, or pay for an expensive upgrade in order to get access to that feature. So in summary, it's a large amount of responsibility is being placed on the authoring tool in terms of those who are developing the authoring tool, and as well as the online platform to be able to provide support for closed captioning. easy to use, reminding people the option is there, and trying to discourage people from uploading video that does not include closed captioning. So making the entire process easier, to make closed captioning more prevalent, to make it harder to not provide closed captions. Thank you. I'll turn it back over to Kara.
Thank you, Christian. Really great points there. This is KR speaking. I think what's really important here is YouTube has a creator tool that does make it very simple for creators to add captioning to their content, to edit it. What we as Google are hoping to continue to do is share our expertise, our innovation, our knowledge, our best practices with other platforms to help them integrate these best practices, right? So this has been a journey. So much has changed with the way that consumers, especially deaf and hard of hearing consumers, are experiencing content online. So the more that we can help creators have easy access to editing and providing captioning to their content, the more that that is visible. And then the more that we can encourage other platforms to provide those tools to help make captioning available for creators. So we really encourage that, because captioning can be a beautiful part of the creator experience and the creative process, right? And that's what's important here, is captioning very much as a part of communication and connecting with people, and allowing people to experience that content is really important, no matter how you experience it or how you need to experience it. So sharing our tools, our innovation, our best practices with our partners has been very important, and we'll continue to do that and work with other partners to learn from each other. And that's something I really want to encourage here in this conversation, is we're all trying to make our platform accessible, right? And we're all trying to think of ways that we can encourage those best practices, and including and thinking about people who we really, like myself, I depend on captioning every day, right? And so I don't want to be left out of that experience, and I certainly don't want others to. So it's important that we're sharing that knowledge, and I'm grateful for several people here on this panel that we are continuing to work together to do that. So I think all we can do right now is definitely work together, share our learnings and our best practices, and to Christian's point, find ways to do more research, better testing, to improve accuracy and improve innovation. That's what we're here to do. So I'm excited, honestly, that captioning has become more visible and more something that people are including in their content. But again, we also need to help them on the journey and help them understand what are the best practices and best ways to make that content inclusive, and the experience inclusive as well.
Thank you, Christian and KR. Now, for the last question, I'm going to give everybody a minute and a half, because we need to conclude the panel by 2:35. And you could also use what I'm about to read as the last question to say any concluding remarks within that minute and a half, that same minute and a half as well. So, so the question is, do you hear from consumers directly on these issues? And how do you respond to their concerns and questions? I'm going to weave into that an audience question, which is if consumers are unhappy with the quality of the captions, how can this be communicated to you? And of course, anything else you would like to add before the panel closes. Everybody gets a minute and a half, and we will start with Heather.
Simply, yes. We very much value member feedback. There are a number of different ways that members can provide us their input and feedback on closed captioning, whether that's through chat or voice through our customer service channels, but we also make it really easy when watching a title that we have a report a problem tool that members can click on it and provide that feedback there or through their account. There are also a number of feedback forms on the web. So lots of ways that we are gathering feedback. I also want to mention just some really important things. I loved how KR summarized it, which is really just continuing to learn because there are so many opportunities in this space. And one of the ways that we continue to learn and garner feedback is through our teams that actually conduct research sessions with members with disabilities to really understand what the challenges are, but also this helps us keep the conversation going internally, which is always very important because as we all know, accessibility is a journey. And so along that journey, we do partner proactively with disability advocacy organizations that particularly serve members who are deaf and hard of hearing. And our goal is to continue to develop more partnerships and partner together to make entertainment more accessible. Thank you for having me today.
Okay, thank you, Heather. KR?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, Google makes it very accessible for consumers to provide us feedback. We take that feedback very seriously. We work with many different organizations, disability community members. We have trusted tester programs with our community to make sure that we are looking at ways that we're including their voice and their feedback and perspective in the process, everything from product innovation to content creation, which is also important. But one thing I want to say that's incredibly important and something Google is extremely committed to, and I'm proud to say I'm an example of that, is oftentimes we bring in experts from the community in the disability community, and we hire them. We hire them and we have them as part of our team and as part of the Google family to help make us better, to help bring the knowledge and lived experiences and perspective and expertise to help us grow and make our products more accessible, to make our experiences more accessible. And that's really important. And we talked earlier about, making sure that we bring the disability community not only in front of the camera, but behind it, and making sure that the content we're creating and the stories that we're telling are from the community, by the community. And that's incredibly important here, is we need to be designing with the community, and we need to be bringing them into the process. We need to be hiring them. And that's something we are deeply committed to as Google, and we will continue to do because it's an incredibly valuable perspective that will only make us better. So thank you.
Thank you, KR. Daniel?
Thank you. Yes, as well, customers can visit Amazon.com accessibility, where customers can provide feedback directly to Prime Video regarding the accessibility of our products and services, as well as links to our dedicated accessibility customer service team. We also know that a lot of customers, it's a friction, and they may not want to call into customer service, and so we also proactively monitor social media to seek out feedback on customer pain points, including the availability and quality of closed captions. And so, if you don't want to contact customer service, if you complain online, we may also find that as well. But if it's really important, definitely recommend calling our customer service line. When customers do contact us or we find issues online, we have robust internal mechanisms to route issues to teams that fix the problem. In the case of poor quality or closed captions, this is my team. But regardless, when any customer escalation contacts us about any issue, we use these as test cases to deep dive into our processes and systems end to end, and identify how we can catch and correct these types of issues at scale. And so, if you reach out to us about a specific issue, we may take that as a use case that we would root cause a systemic issue, and you may be able to help us improve the customer experience for millions of customers as well. I just wanted to build also on KR's point about treating accessibility as kind of the core of what you do. And that at Prime Video, we have a dedicated accessibility team as well as a larger accessibility community within Amazon who provides domain expertise across various customer needs. It's very critical, that we also hire members of the community to help build these products and features, and we do that as much as possible, and we continue to try to recruit the best and brightest in those areas to help us build these services. And because again, we believe at Prime Video that accessibility is inherent to everything that we do, and so that when we innovate, we do so for everyone. So thank you.
Thank you, Daniel. Jim?
Thank you, Elliot. I want to start out just very quickly circling back to Dr. Vogler's comment about preserving closed captions. We completely agree. I think once closed captions exist, we want to make sure that they don't get removed as part of the production process. So we're in alignment with his comments. In terms of consumers reporting issues with closed captions, Peacock has a dedicated professional customer care team that handles these questions from consumers on a variety of issues via chat. During our first year of operation, we've received an average of about 400 inquiries each month around the operation of closed captioning or subtitles. Both Peacock and NBC.com also have dedicated email and phone contacts specifically for closed captioning issues or concerns. So we field their questions that way. In terms of response, the response will vary depending on the root cause. So we really have to evaluate each, and we try to address each of them as best we can, depending on what the root cause of the issue is. So that there is no uniform answer. In general, we believe in terms of closed captioning and accessibility will reflect this similar comments to you've heard from those that you've heard from other panelists. We believe it's quite important to be able to serve the community. We want to make sure that our content and our services are available to all of the audience, not just some. And so we put effort and focus into making sure that that's the case. Thanks for having me on the panel today. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Jim. And Christian, I'll give you a chance to have the last word.
Thank you. This is Christian speaking. I wanted to add, and just to reinforce a point that was made. If you do get feedback from consumers, make sure that you're valuing that consumer feedback, meaning that you get a response and some kind of resolution to that problem. That I think is the most critical point. I do sometimes hear from consumers and among support groups and researching their comments, and they complain that sometimes they send feedback in and they simply never hear of any resolution, or they never hear anything back whatsoever. So I would encourage you to attend to being responsive to those types of concerns. Second thing I'd like to say is just to emphasize the value of eating your own dog food. Meaning developers using your own product so that you can try to identify any holes or issues with it. Much like how people are working to distribute closed captioning, ensure that they have to watch their video with closed captioning on and without audio, so that they can try to see what the deaf and hard of hearing experience is like viewing that content. That's all. Thank you.
Okay. Well, this is Elliot again. I'd like to thank all the panelists. I think this was a great panel. A lot of great ideas were discussed. And thank you so much for participating. And I'm going to turn the floor back to Hillary.
This is Hillary Negro again. Thank you, Elliot, and thank you to our 5 panelists. That was a very engaging discussion. I think we all got a lot out of it. Let's take a 5-minute break and then reconvene to begin our second panel. I will see you in 5 minutes. Welcome back, everyone. Thanks for joining us for the second portion of our video accessibility forum today. This second panel is going to be moderated by Diana Sokolow, who is an attorney advisor in the Media Bureau's Policy Division. She is going to moderate a panel discussing the FCC's role in this area, and has a group of panelists to join her to discuss what role the FCC can play. I'd like to turn it over now to Diana.
Thanks, Hillary, and good afternoon, everyone. I am pleased to be here today to facilitate a discussion of this important topic. In our first panel, we discussed the technical and business issues currently surrounding online closed captioning. Now we would like to turn our attention to the role the FCC can play moving forward in the area of online closed captioning. Obviously, the FCC is a regulator, and one avenue for addressing consumer accessibility needs and solving consumer problems is to conduct rulemakings. The Commission can also encourage the continued rollout of captioning in the online arena by highlighting and amplifying best practices and engaging with experts to deliberate about the challenges that may exist. To start, I am going to ask each of our 4 panelists to introduce themselves and their organization, and to briefly provide an overview of their work on online closed captioning and their perspective on the FCC's role. Our panelists are Zainab Al-Kebsi, Policy Counsel at the National Association of the Deaf, Jacqueline Clary, Vice President and Associate Counsel, Program Network Policy at NCTA, the Internet and Television Association, Blake Reed, Clinical Professor at the Samuelson Glushko Technology Law and Policy Clinic at Colorado Law, and Larry Walke, Associate General Counsel for the National Association of Broadcasters. First, I'll turn the floor over to Zainab.
Thank you. To give a description of myself first, I am an Arab American woman with light skin and curly hair, brown rimmed glasses, a black jacket and a black shirt with a pattern on the front. My background is gray on the top portion of my walls, and there is a bookshelf behind me with a wood floor. My name is Zainab Al-Kebsi. My sign name is AZ. My pronouns are she and her. I am counsel for the National Association of the Deaf, NAD. We advocate and work to push for full and equal access to programs, to access programs and content. This issue is so important to us, and I do really encourage you to try watching a video, be it a video clip. Make sure that this clip has no sound and no captions. If you do so, you'll be in our shoes and you'll understand exactly why we're saying what we say. And that's just a taste of the frustrations that we as deaf and hard of hearing people experience on a daily basis. The NAD has long advocated for increased online captioning. Notably, the NAD had a case against Netflix, which resulted in 100% captioning on Netflix after that case. Other streaming platforms are soon to follow with voluntary agreements for 100% captioning. An example is Prime, Hulu, Voodoo, Apple, and others. Some of you have probably seen some of these in the past panel. This has to do with how ubiquitous internet programming is now. We also advocate on the regulations level with the FCC in regards to the CVAA content. I'll expand a bit about that later on how specifically the FCC can expand their role beyond just television clips that are then shown on the internet. Thank you so much, and I'm very honored to be on this panel today. I look forward to our discussion.
Thank you, Zainab. Next here is Jacqueline.
Thanks, Diana. I wanted to say first, thank you for inviting me to participate. I'm very delighted to be here on behalf of NCTA, the Internet and Television Association, on this panel. My name is Jacqueline Clary. I'm the Vice President and Associate Counsel for Program Network Policy at NCTA. And for a visual description, I am a white female with long brown hair, and I'm wearing a black blouse and white blazer. So I wanted to start by noting that in today's highly competitive market, our members, which are both cable operators and cable program networks, are very committed to providing high quality captions to their audiences. And I wanted to highlight that because I know we'll be talking a lot about the FCC's authority. And I did want to mention that beyond this, there's a strong commitment in the industry. And to further this goal, our members invest in countless hours of caption programming to be delivered both on television and online. And beyond the requirements of the CVAA, our industry continues to advance accessibility solutions for its consumers with additional online caption content and innovation in product design. So I'll pause there, and I just, again, thank you, and I look forward to discussing further.
Thank you, Jacqueline. Next, we have Blake.
Thanks, Diana. Blake Reed. I'm a white man with short brown hair, wearing a blue shirt and a navy jacket. He, him pronouns. And I'm a clinical professor at Colorado Law, where I direct the Samuelson Glushko Technology, Law, and Policy Clinic. And we serve as counsel to TDI. And TDI has been working on closed captioning law and policy for many decades, including the implementation of many of the pieces of legislation that Senator Markey mentioned earlier. And our goal here is pretty straightforward, but we think pretty important: making all video accessible on equitable terms to people with disabilities generally, and people who are deaf, hard of hearing, or deafblind in particular, and to make the video ecosystem open to and inclusive of creators with disabilities. And we think doing so is essential to ensure that the civil rights of people with disabilities to the economic, cultural, educational, and democratic benefits to one of the most foundational technologies in American society are vindicated. Closed captioning technology has existed in principle since the 1940s, and yet we sit here 85 years later with ubiquitous video accessibility remaining elusive. We think the FCC can and must continue to play a critical role in achieving this goal, thanks to the groundbreaking legislation championed by Senator Markey and others. And with our thanks to Chairwoman Rosenworcel and everyone at the FCC for their work to implement that legislation and to organize this forum today, we look forward to discussing additional steps that the Commission can take. Back to you, Diana.
Thank you, Blake. Finally, here is Larry.
Thank you. As Diana mentioned, I'm Larry Walk, Associate General Counsel for NAB. For visual description, I'm a white male in my 50s with short brown hair, and I'm wearing a light blue checked shirt under a black sport coat. I have been working on accessibility issues for NAB for about 5 years, and I have been a member of the FCC's DAC for several terms. I would also like to add that even though accessibility is only one of a number of issues that I work on here at NAB, it's definitely the most gratifying, and I always appreciate the chance to work with Zainab and Blake and others in the accessibility community. NAB represents America's radio and television stations, specifically your local free over-the-air TV stations that are physically located and employ people who actually live within the communities they serve. TV broadcasters are proud of their efforts to make video programming accessible to persons who are deaf or hard of hearing. They have worked hard to implement the CVAA and the FCC's policies and many voluntary measures to help ensure access to their content. And they do this because it's the right thing to do and to make sure that their valuable, locally oriented news and information can be enjoyed by as many people as possible. In fact, NAB understands that captioning of television programming continues to improve all the time, and that consumer satisfaction may actually be at an all-time high. For example, we understand from our members that consumer complaints about captioning to both the FCC and directly to stations are trending down. And when complaints do occur, they often involve some kind of one-time technical glitch or oversight that stations can usually resolve fairly quickly. As for captioning of programming online, TV broadcasters fully comply with the CVAA's mandate that video programming that was first shown on television with captions remains captioned when the content is later shown online on a TV station's website or their app. And broadcasters do their best to make sure that captions are included when their content is later displayed on unaffiliated third-party platforms, although doing so is often beyond their control. NAB, we generally believe that CVAA and the FCC's rules strike a reasonable balance between ensuring access to television programming without imposing undue burdens on broadcasters. We find that the FCC's current approach fosters innovation, collaboration among all the stakeholders, and an efficient process for resolving problems when they arise. We believe the FCC's current approach is working very well, and that additional regulations could run the risk of impeding the expansion of captioning to more online programming. Thank you very much for inviting NAB to this important forum, and I look forward to the discussion.
Thanks, Larry. I'd like to thank all of the panelists for sharing your expertise with us today. I will begin by posing some questions to the panel, and towards the end, we'll try to leave some time for audience questions. As a reminder, if anyone watching online would like to ask these panelists a question, please submit it via email to livequestions@fcc.gov. And with that, I will turn to our first question. As Susie mentioned in her overview of the relevant FCC rules, the CVAA directed the Commission to require captions online if the programming is shown on TV with captions. The stated purpose of the CVAA was to help ensure that individuals with disabilities are able to fully utilize communication services and equipment and better access video programming. So I'd like to ask the panelists, in your view, what authority does the FCC possess regarding captioning of online programming outside the context of programming that has aired on conventional TV? We'll start with Blake.
Thanks, Diana. And Zainab and I are going to try to tag team our answers here so we have time to get through more topics. So I'll take this one, and I know she's going to take the lead on the next one. So as you and Susie mentioned, we live in this world where the FCC's captioning rules are divided between the legacy media, broadcast, cable, satellite, and so forth, and then a separate set of rules for programming that's delivered via internet protocol that has been on one of those legacy media channels. And we think we don't live in that world anymore. We now live in a world where legacy TV and internet delivered video have converged. Online video delivery and TV, from the perspective of consumers, are now one and the same. And fortunately, in our view, the FCC actually has broad technology neutral authority under the 96 Telecom Act to revisit this two-tiered structure, this bifurcated structure of TV and IP delivered captioning rules. And indeed, the authority is to ensure that video programming is fully accessible through the provision of captions. I think Senator Markey and the other champions of the 96 Act were quite forward-looking in not specifying distribution technology in the 96 Act. And indeed, the Commission, when it was implementing the 96 Act, even envisioned the possibility of extending its TV rules to internet delivered programming. And the focus on broadcast and MVPD delivery in the implementation of the 96 Act was a function of what television was broadly perceived to be at the time. And we live in a different world now. The commission could easily conclude that all online delivered programming constitutes video programming under the 96 Act and must be covered under its rules. We think the CVA, which is critically important in broaching the world of IP delivered captions, is best understood as a specific command of the commission to exercise that broad authority under the 96 Act for a particular set of IP delivered programming. But even if the CVA is read as a narrowing of the commission's authority rather than a clarification of its broad plenary authority under the 96 Act, we still think the commission possesses authority to go further. The CVA contemplates that there's a core of video programming delivered on quote unquote television that must be captioned under the 96 rules. And again, the commission, industry, and consumers alike consider online video programming to be television. As a record in the commission's communications marketplace report and the many filings, including by some of the organizations represented here today, suggest the difference between these two things is no longer meaningful. The commission already treats IP-based technologies used in broadcast and cable under the television rules, and it's not a significant departure in our view for the commission to basically recognize the reality that consumers and industry alike see, which is that online video distribution services are television, and that it's time that we extend the mandate for closed captions for all television programming to be closed captioned to online video delivery. Thanks, Diana, and turn it back to you.
Thank you, Blake. And Zainab, I know that Blake mentioned that you will be taking turns responding to questions, but I just wanted to ask if you have anything to add before we move to the next panelist.
This is Zainab speaking. Blake completely covered everything. I just wanted to echo what he said, that the fact that the FCC already has this authority to do this, Blake already explained this in significantly more detail, but we have already filed comments, of course, that you can see there. The FCC can act because there is a day, any day that we do not take action is another day that the community is missing out on this content. So I do hope that the outcome of this forum is that this is just the beginning of a process rather than the end. I know that we're going to, I'm going to go ahead and wrap up my comments there due to time.
Thank you, Zainab. We will turn to Larry next.
Hi, thank you. Yeah, I think we've dove into the weeds of statutory construction here. I don't know how interesting the audience will find this, but I mean, of course, we can't dispute the fact that we're living in a different world, that to most people, television, it looks the same, whether it comes from Netflix or a cable channel or an over-the-air TV station. Many people don't even make a distinction. We've made the argument many times that television stations compete with those other sources for eyeballs and the attention of Americans. All that said, unfortunately, notwithstanding Blake's view of the 96 Act, I believe that it's the CVAA kind of occupies the field. I mean, the CVAA was very clear that TV stations must caption video that was shown on TV with captions prior to it being displayed online on their app or their website. It defines video programming as programming by or generally considered comparable to programming provided by a television station. And even the spirit of the CVAA recognizes the realities and the challenges of captioning programming. There are special rules for live and near live programming, for example. And I was doing a little research. The Senate report of the CVAA makes it clear that the rules are intended to apply prospectively only to programming that is aired on television with captions and also delivered using internet protocol. At the time, I mean, the CVAA is only 10 or 11 years old. At the time, Congress was definitely aware of the growth and the explosion of video programming on the internet. YouTube already had 100 million users. Netflix was already 4 years old. Facebook was 5 years old. Amazon had announced plans for Amazon Prime. I mean, in my view, clearly Congress had the knowledge and the opportunity to recognize the limits that may have been placed in the 96 Act and expand or extend the FCC's authority in the CVAA to online video that had not previously been shown on television. But it specifically chose not to. It didn't even instruct the FCC to do a rulemaking to gauge the best efforts or require stakeholders or industry to, caption that video to the extent possible. So we think that the CVAA, which is a much later in time act, kind of supersedes the Telecom Act on this point and occupies the field. And it was directly adopted in response to the growth of internet video. And so again, assuming Congress was aware, as Senator Markey said, of the internet and the growth of online video programming in 2010, if they had intended to give the FCC authority to regulate, to require captions on programming that had not previously been shown on television, they would have done so. So unfortunately, my final answer would probably be that Congress, the FCC needs some more statutory authority to from Congress to cover the programming we're speaking about today. Thank you.
Thank you, Larry. I'd like to ask you a quick follow-up question. Exactly what sort of authority would the Commission need from Congress to adopt regulations governing captioning of online-only programming, in your view?
Well, I haven't really thought about specific text, but I suppose some kind of authority that grants the FCC authority to require the captioning of video programming that has not previously been shown on television. I know that there's a lot of captioning going on in that area voluntarily or, in response to market forces or legal cases. But as far as the FCC being able to require it, it just doesn't seem like they have plain and clear authority under the framework right now.
Thanks, Larry. I'd like to turn to Jacqueline for the initial question. Back to, in your view, what authority does the FCC possess regarding captioning of online programming outside the context of programming that has aired on conventional TV?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think the statute's pretty clear on this front. And we view the CVA as being one part of an interconnected framework that governs disability rights and accessibility in the United States. And as Larry said, when Congress enacted the CVAA, they considered issues surrounding online-only content and ultimately granted the FCC authority to quote the statute, require the provision of closed captioning on video programming delivered using the Internet Protocol that was published or exhibited on television with captions after the effective date of such regulations. And then again, just to echo Larry, the legislative history really expands on this point. But despite all this, sorry, let me back up. So no other need was determined at this time. But despite all of this, under the current legislative and regulatory regime, as we heard on the last panel, our industry and other industries continue to enhance accessibility for its consumers. But if I had to sum the FCC's authority, I think any interpretation of the CVAA that would read the FCC's authority to require online captioning beyond programming aired on conventional television would be not only inconsistent with the plain language of the statute, but also the legislative intent. Further, it would render parts of the statute, specifically the parts requiring the captions to first be aired on television, as meaningless. And I assume you're going to ask a follow-up question, so I'll jump in and say, in order for the FCC to be able to regulate online content, I think the FCC would need an express grant of authority from Congress to do so.
Thank you, Jacqueline. We'll move on to our next question. Recognizing that content is increasingly premiering online without first being shown on conventional TV, and that consumers benefit from the availability of closed captioning, How can the Commission support consumers' access to captioning of online programming that is not also shown on television? How do we fill some of the gaps in the current online closed captioning requirements to the benefit of consumers? For example, is there a role the FCC can play in enhancing the availability of online closed captioning outside the context of a rulemaking? We'll turn to Larry first.
Sorry, you caught me off guard. I thought you were going to go to Jackie first. Sort of in that vein, I think I will defer mostly to Jackie on this question because it really relates to pure play online video programming that has not necessarily been shown on television before. So that does come a little bit more directly under her expertise over at NCTA. The only thing I would add is, as far as what the FCC can do in this area, well, first I would mention that, there is a trend for more online video to be captioned all the time. I think we heard about that on the first panel. Outlets are doing this because it's the right thing to do. They're doing it because of a competitive mandate. If they see Netflix doing it and they want to compete, they got to make sure that all their programming is captioned also if they want to win the hearts and minds of consumers out there. As far as what the FCC can do in this area, I would say really two things. First, somehow the FCC has to figure out a way to engage and educate and encourage online platforms to voluntarily caption content. More multi-stakeholder forums and events like this, perhaps trying to loop in some of the other guys out there besides Netflix and the Amazons who are so prevalent. And secondly, I would say the FCC should try to be careful to do no harm. We learned a lot in the first panel about the use and the growth of ASR, and we would caution the FCC against adopting any rules that might hinder innovation or technologies that could make it more efficient to caption programming online. I won't go into the pros and cons of ASR right now, but those are the two things I would suggest for the FCC on this score. Thank you.
Thanks, Larry. We will turn to Jacqueline next.
Thanks. So again, starting from the proposition that without an express grant of authority to regulate in this area, the best role for the FCC is really to facilitate conversations and potential solutions between industry and advocates. And this stakeholder forum is a great example of that type of conversation. But in addition to this, the Commission also facilitates greater accessibility awareness and engagement through the critical work of the Disability Advisory Committee, or DAC. So one example of a recommendation that came out of the DAC recently is, I believe it was last term, audio description best practices. So this sort of work should be encouraged, and we hope the FCC will continue to do this. And in terms of solutions, I agree with Larry completely. I think to the extent the FCC can encourage voluntary industry efforts for evolving accessibility solutions like ASR, could be really helpful. As we mentioned in our previous comments, NCTA members are researching and investing in ASR solutions. And one of the reasons this machine learning technology and these solutions are so exciting is that they improve over time and with use. But even outside of the FCC's involvement, efforts continue. So for example, in the past, NCTA and NAB have hosted an industry and advocate forum to discuss captioning issues due to COVID. Unfortunately, the last meeting was held at the end of 2019, but we do hope to start those again soon. And then again, as mentioned above, beyond what the FCC is doing, industry is doing quite a lot. Again, these are our customers. We are very concerned with serving our customers, and we are engaging in additional online captioning primarily to remain competitive in the attention economy and pursuant to consumer demand. So thank you.
Thank you, Jacqueline. Zainab, will you be taking the lead on this response on behalf of you and Blake?
This is Zainab speaking. I will be taking the lead on this one. Yes, thank you. To respond to what the two of you have just mentioned, education and engaging in conversation is quite critical, but that's not sufficient by itself. There's more that the FCC can do. It's similar to what NAD and how we have sourced voluntary commitments from several streaming providers, like I mentioned earlier. The FCC is only sort of in the meantime before more formalized solutions can be acquired. So the FCC can still continue to ensure voluntary commitments from industry, commitments that aspire to the goal of 100% captioning for the meantime. However, mandates are also necessary. To that end, the FCC can coordinate with Congress to help shape new legislation in this area. The FCC's collaboration with the FCC is contending with multiple different competing legislations in regards to accessibility and captioning. This makes a tremendous difference because users now have the discussion to be able to lend shape to how this transition could look like. The FCC's commitment to feedback and engaging consumers is tremendous. However, they do need to build out the record of issues to be able to then address through an NOI or through similar actions. The fact gathering needs to be part of the mission, and that would help to develop a robust record on this issue. These are just a few of the examples of things that the FCC can do to expand their role to ensure that users are getting the access that we deserve. I'll now turn it over to Blake to add any additional thoughts.
Thanks, Zainab, and echo completely what you've had to say. And I just want to underscore a couple of points. One in agreement with what Larry and Jacqueline started us off with. And we are big believers in multi-stakeholderism. And I think one of the most underappreciated legacies of the CVA and the FCC's implementation of the CVA is that commitment to multi-stakeholder gatherings and bringing people together in an environment where the industry can hear from, work with consumers to help understand the right way to approach these the accessibility challenges that we're talking about today. And I think we see a generation of companies, again, many of them represented on the panel today, who grew up in the wake of the CVA and built out serious commitments to accessibility, built out serious accessibility teams, prioritize testing, hiring, and working with the disabled communities to ensure that their products are accessible. And I think that's critical. So we agree with Larry and Jacqueline on that. I do want to sound a cautionary note about innovation, however, and I have to say we're extremely pro innovation, and the role that innovation plays in ensuring accessibility is undeniable, in the spirit of innovation that drives so much of the American economy and industry is really undeniable and really, really important. But we have to recognize when we're talking about closed captioning that we're talking about technologies that in principle have existed for many decades and bordering on a century now. And at some point, the rubber needs to meet the road with innovation. And when we talk about the problems that came up on the first panel, there there are certainly places where innovation can drive things forward. When we talk about automatic speech recognition, when we talk about automated testing and solutions, there's certainly a lot of ore to mine there. But there's also a lot of hard work that needs to happen. There are a lot of resources that need to go into implementing and blocking and tackling on accessibility solutions. And our experience over the lifespan of closed captioning over the last several decades has been that needs a nudge from the FCC. That needs that pressure from the FCC to happen ubiquitously across the industry. And so while that multi-stakeholderism is important and innovation is important, it needs to come with the legal obligations that only the FCC can bring, because at the end of the day, we're talking about the civil rights of people with disabilities. It's not optional. It's not aspirational. It's something that's absolutely necessary to ensure an equitable society. And that's ultimately what we're striving for here.
Thank you, Zainab and Blake. We'll turn to our next question. As Susie referenced during her overview of the FCC rules, the Commission's rules for closed captioning of online video clips are much narrower than the rules for closed captioning of full-length online video programming. Specifically, video clips are only required to be captioned if the same entity that shows the program on television posts a clip of it on that entity's own website or app. The captioning requirements do not apply to video clips that are posted online before the associated video programming is shown on television with captions. And there is a 12-hour grace period for adding captions to online clips of live programming, and an 8-hour grace period for adding captions to online clips of near live programming. Recognizing the clear interest in ensuring that deaf or hard of hearing consumers have the ability to engage with this content like anyone else, should the FCC expand the captioning requirements for video clips in any way? I'll ask each panelist to briefly explain what, if any, modifications you support, and we will start with Jacqueline.
Thanks. If it's all right, can I back up just for a second to address Blake's last comment?
Sure, that's fine.
Thank you, because I do think we agree there. And I think, especially with respect to ASR, I think when you talk about these evolving innovations, yes, of course, we agree that there should be some level of oversight. We think, honestly, the industry is in a good position to provide that oversight. We've had meetings and we've got ex partes on the record to discuss that further. But it would be nice and it would be helpful, I think, if the FCC could remove some of potentially the stigma that's associated with some of these evolving solutions like ASR. So, you know, maybe even in the first instance when networks are going above and beyond and working and experimenting in the, you know, clips or exceptions or, you know, using ASR to formulate clips that are not subject to the FCC's jurisdiction, you know, those things could be offered as positive examples, because again, this is technology that gets better with time and with use. Okay, turning to the question at hand in terms of clips. So yes, I think there are different rules for clips than for full-length programming, and some of the examples you mentioned, I think, go beyond the FCC's authority, like again, advanced clips. And just for example, this goes back to the authority issue overall when the FCC is looking at regulating online content. And I think when the commission originally set up the clip rules, they appropriately imposed the rules only on clips of video programming that were already covered by the statute. And beyond that, I know that for clips delivered via third-party apps, which was mentioned, and with respect to the grace period for captioning live and near live programming, those limitations continue to be useful for some of our members. I know that for clips that are delivered via third-party online websites and apps, some of the issues here include challenges with the number of platforms and websites where content might appear online, and also just the lack of control over third-party apps. So for example, a program network might send captions to a third-party website, but the program networks and the FCC typically lack authority over whether these third parties deliver the captions intact. And then beyond that, there's also the issue of unauthorized use and websites that rip and repost content. So I just wanted to raise that as a potential issue. And then as for the grace period, again, I think that also remains useful for some programmers at least. And my understanding here is that some, if not many, of full-length programs can't be reused as clips, and networks often have to recut or recreate separate files and send and recaption the clips essentially. And this can be challenging on third-party websites as well if the third-party policies have prohibitions on editing content once files are posted online. So I'll pause there, but I'm happy to go back.
Thank you, Jacqueline. We'll turn to Larry next.
Okay, thank you. Well, Jackie stole most of my thunder on this question. I think the one important thing to recognize on the out of the box is that we're all on the same page when it comes to video clips. If a broadcaster has produced some kind of clip and it shows up on some random third-party unaffiliated platform with a little logo of NBC or CBS or what have you in the corner without captions, that's embarrassing. They want their clips to remain captioned wherever they go. Unfortunately, to a large extent, it's just out of their hands and beyond their control. If the FCC did have the authority in this area to adopt more rules and were to adopt more rules, we're not exactly sure, how they would work, because requiring broadcasters to somehow make sure that captions remain on these clips wherever they go, to a certain degree, might be placing them in just an impossible situation between a rock and a hard place. There's thousands and thousands of websites, of course. There's, Jackie alluded to, there's lots of unauthorized use of clips. There's no way for a TV station to track or monitor or tell whether their clip has even shown up on a third party's platform. And if it doesn't have captions, did the third party platform take the clip directly from their website or app, or did they take it from some intermediary location before reposting it? It's just very difficult and almost impossible to tell. And then, of course, if broadcasters are somehow made required to make sure that captions remain and a clip shows up on some unauthorized third-party platform that they don't know anything about, a broadcaster doesn't have any legal recourse or authority over that third-party platform to force them to do anything, really. My own personal speculation is this probably has to be a technology fix. I don't know where rules would play a part here. As far as what the FCC can do, I think I would just reiterate my earlier point that there are technologies like ASR and other things that are growing and developing and getting better and better all the time. And if the FCC wanted to take a role here, they could encourage and somehow support those kinds of technologies, because that's probably going to be the avenue that will make it more efficient and more economical for these other third-party platforms to easily caption video clips that they post on their website. So I think Jackie had a nice point there about not stigmatizing these kinds of things, but rather supporting these kinds of things, or at least making sure that there aren't any rules that would inhibit their development. Thank you.
Thanks, Larry. Blake and Zainab, I'm not sure which of you wanted to take the lead on this question.
Thanks, Diana. I'll take this one, then turn briefly to Zainab for follow-up. So I think underscoring this discussion, which it can sound esoteric and sort of in the legal weeds, is a really important reality that a huge proportion of the video watching that people do is watching video clips posted on social media platforms. That's just the reality of what people are consuming today. And I think what you heard during the first panel and in Jacqueline and Larry's responses here is that the Commission's rules in this area are incredibly complicated. And Zainab and I know from the experience of trying to explain to consumers at conferences and who reach out to our organizations for help about how the complexities work here. And that's a real problem to tell consumers that that there are these rules that map onto the interstices of industry distribution structures that determine whether a video is actually going to be captioned or not. And it's disheartening to consumers. It's too complicated, and it leads a lot of them to give up because they don't know why a video clip showed up and it wasn't captioned, or it leads them to resort to asking people on social media to caption it. It leads to all these efforts that would be unnecessary if both the Commission took some basic revisions to its rules and the industry adopted some pretty straightforward practices to make sure that video clips that are shared, especially via social media, are better captioned. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter where a video clip comes from or where it's shown. It needs to be captioned. It needs to be accessible. And if it isn't, that's a civil rights problem. So I think, Diana, you mentioned the 3 loopholes, and we think the Commission has very straightforward authority to close these loopholes. The 8 and 12 hour grace periods for live and near live programming under Rule 79.4B2. These allow breaking news stories to remain accessible until they become stale and people with disabilities have been left out. And a related note on the first panel, it came up, I think is a terrific idea. There should be best efforts captions done immediately on live and near live clips, and improved quality offline captioning should be done shortly thereafter, or as quickly as practicable thereafter. Archival programming that's excluded under Rule 79.4 B1, or it's implicitly excluded under 79.4 B1. It's critical for popular clips that have a long shelf life that were posted before the rules went into effect to be captioned. And distributors shouldn't be making subjective judgments about which of those pieces of content get covered. It's when we're talking about commercial content, it all ought to be captioned. And third, but perhaps the most important, is this third-party loophole under 79.4B2 that clips must only be captioned if posted on the distributor or provider's own website or application. Again, this is not where most people are viewing video clips, right? The requirement for it to be captioned on the distributor's website is meaningless if everybody is looking at it on Facebook or Twitter, or posted to YouTube, or posted to other platforms. And it's critical that the FCC address that loophole. Many of the problems, I'll just close and say, that motivated the enactment of these loopholes in the first place are rooted in these old-fashioned workflows for clip generation and video distribution that, as Christian emphasized on the first panel, really need to be overhauled. And we recognize, to Larry's point, look, we think broadcasters, we think cable networks, we think other originators of content can do a lot more, because in a lot of cases, they are posting to social media. They're posting clips to social media. It's not some random website. It's one of a few platforms, and it's coming from the provider or the distributor themselves. And we also recognize that there is some content sharing that happens without their authorization. So in that vein, we need to address the obligations of social media platforms to caption content that slips through the cracks, whose provenance is unknown. We need to have better authoring tools for consumers who share media without authorization to be able to add captions, to be able to add descriptions. And we need to have social media platforms doing a better job of checking and enforcing accessibility requirements on the video that they host. But all of these loopholes are not commanded by the CVA. The Commission has straightforward discretion to eliminate them and address them, and we highly recommend that they do so. Thanks.
And Zainab, did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
Yes, this is Zainab signing. I echo everything that Blake just said. Most of the time, when you want to watch a video clip, It's on a third-party website, like social media, for instance. That's where everything lives. So the workflow needs to be overhauled. It needs to cover, under the FCC's authority, they really do need to include near live programming as well as archival clips as well. All of these things, these grace periods and loopholes, these all do work to create an unequal experience for deaf and hard of hearing users. There's no justifiable reason for all of these grace periods and loopholes to exist, not when you can improve the workflow to ensure that captioning stay with the content. That's the simple solution. I will say that each definition and so forth does not outweigh the need for accessibility on par with other video available. One last thing I want to add is that this was set up through the FCC's rules. We'd rather address this through the FCC's rules rather than through lawsuits. So I will also go ahead and turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Blake and Zainab. We'll move on to our next question. As consumers continue to view an increased volume of video programming online, what do you envision as the future of the availability of online closed captioning? That is, do you expect that the availability of closed captioning online will continue to increase, even in the absence of additional regulations, or would additional regulations help facilitate this process? Zainab or Blake, would one of you like to get started responding?
Yeah, Diana, I'm happy to take that one and then turn it over to Zainab for some reactions. And just to say, as I know we're closing out here, thanks very much for the opportunity to take part in for facilitating the discussion today, which I think has been really productive. I see sort of two possible paths here. I see the path that has often been a pattern in the past, which is that when it comes to accessibility, we're playing catch up. We're always sort of 5 years behind the bleeding edge of where a medium is going. And by the time we get the sort of accessibility standards and features brought into place, it's too late. We're years behind where we need to be. And that's very much been the experience when it comes to captioning on new mediums. And it's even more so been the case for audio description, which we haven't discussed today. And that's a cycle that is what comes out of having a purely unregulated approach here. Basically, as new technology arises, as a new medium arises, as new technological trends take over, accessibility comes later. Accessibility doesn't become part of the sort of initial offering. It doesn't get built in. It doesn't come along for the ride. And I think that's a real risk without further regulation to move the commission's rules from where they are now, as we shift from the kind of video that we're looking at today to thinking about virtual reality experiences, augmented reality experiences, as we start thinking about what sorts of new video features are going to emerge out of the metaverse and other new technologies that we can't envision yet. Without proactive action, we worry that those technologies are going to remain accessible. But I also see a different path. And I think the different path is for the FCC to take that authority from the '96 Telecom Act and work with Congress to supplement that authority if it feels it's insufficient, and act proactively to make sure that closed captioning and audio description and become part of the initial offering of every new technology, that we expand and cover not just online exclusive programming, but we start thinking about all all of the new mediums that are coming down the pike, all of the new technologies that are coming down the pike, and we secure a joint commitment from the commission, from industry, and from consumers to make sure that all of those platforms are accessible out of the gates, and that accessibility evolves along with that new technology. We think the FCC has a critical role to play in that. We also think our colleagues in the industry have a critical role to play in that. So we thank you, and we thank our colleagues for all the hard work that you do, and we look forward to having more discussions about this down the road. Thanks. Zainab, over to you.
This is Zainab speaking. Blake covered it. And in the interest of time, because I know that we are running out of time here, I would just emphasize again that now is the time to act. And again, I appreciate the commission and industry, their attention to this issue and with this forum, this discussion. I do look forward to further discussion and future action. Thank you.
Thank you, Zainab. Next, we will turn to Larry.
Thank you. As far as your question about more online video programming being captioned, what we see as a third party, as an observer from 10,000 feet, is that more and more video programming that's shown online is being captioned all the time. Much of it is just a competitive mandate. If an online video platform wants to win viewers and win advertisers and subscribers, they're going to need to compete with the other providers who are providing captions. And beyond a competitive mandate, many of them, I assume, are just doing it because it's the right thing to do. It's a civil rights issue, like Zainab mentioned. The FCC is really only a small part of that framework. And I did want to dial back for just a second to a couple of points that Blake made, if that's okay. Just briefly touching on the grace period. We don't necessarily agree with characterizing them as a loophole. We kind of see these 8 and 12-hour grace periods as a recognition of the practical, real-world limitations on broadcasters. When a sporting event ends at the last second, or there's a timely news event, broadcasters don't want to sit around for 8 or 12 hours before they post their clip of it on their website, because before you turn around, some individual has already posted it and it's already gone viral. So they are doing everything they can anyway to race to post that clip as quickly as possible. It's just a practical reality that it's not often just a copy, a cut and paste kind of thing. It's not always a matter of just repurposing from a full-length program very easily. I think Jim Denney from NBC, he went through the different options, the different categories of clips that can arise, and some are relatively easy to do, and some just require more steps and more time. And sometimes stations just need a little breathing room to insert captions, edit them, and review them to make sure they look good before they get up on the air. I don't think a rule that says you have 10 minutes or something like that to post it and commensurate with when it shows on TV is really going to change their ability to do anything. They're already racing as quickly as they possibly can against people who just take their iPhone out and put up a viral video. And I also want to talk just briefly about clips from broadcasters that appear on social media. Without naming names, some of these social media companies, they don't make it very easy for broadcasters to post their clips. They make it fairly onerous in some of the many of the more prevalent kind of outlets. Broadcasters will send their clips captioned, and the social media outlet will reject it. Perhaps because the social media outlet wants to insert its own captions, or goes ahead and inserts its own captions, and it overrides the better captions that have been provided by the television broadcaster. And that leads to kind of a manual cleanup that takes a little bit of time. So just like to a certain extent, broadcasters don't have any control over unauthorized third-party platforms that show full length or other kinds of clips, they only have so much control over these behemoth social media platforms that where they want to repost their clips captioned and run into some obstacles along the way. So, but I think we're all on the same page. Everybody wants to have more and more video, have as much 99, 100%, 110% captioned. But there are just some real world challenges that we need to get past. So like everyone else said, thank you very much for having NAB on the panel today. It's a great discussion. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Larry. And finally, we will turn to Jacqueline.
Thanks, Diana. Quick answer would be yes, I definitely expect to see more closed captioning online. I know that program networks and MVPDs continue to look for new ways to serve all customers on as many platforms as possible, particularly as competition increases in the intention economy. So just to highlight one example of recent innovation, Charter Spectrum Access app, which launched last year, provides closed captioning for television and movie titles and audio descriptions on users' personal devices. And even what they're finding is even beyond the closed captioning use case, certain users with hearing impairments have been using the app in tandem with personal earphones to customize the volume of their entertainment while watching television with others. So this is just one example of a use case, but I would expect to see more accessibility solutions, and then ideally more accessibility solutions that incorporate accessibility by design, as well as more online captioning, as in the absence of additional regulations. And this would be primarily as a function of competition and technology innovation. And then I just want to end by thanking again the FCC and everyone else on this panel for a great discussion. I look forward to continuing to work with all of you as we continue the discussions and hopefully arrive at more solutions. Thanks.
Thank you, Jacqueline. I think that is all we have time for today. I would like to thank our panelists once again for their participation in this forum, and I will turn it over to Hillary to share some closing remarks. Thanks, everyone.
Hi, I'd like to thank everyone for participating in today's forum, including those of you who participated online. For questions that we weren't able to get to today, we'll try to respond to them directly online. Thank you to Chairwoman Rosenwortzel for supporting this work and for joining us today. Thank you to the Media Bureau Chief, Michelle Carey, for kicking us off. And on behalf of all of the commission staff, I'd like to offer a special thanks to Senator Markey for providing inspiring keynote remarks and for his leadership in this area. Thanks to all the CGB and Media Bureau staff that worked to pull today's event together, and specifically Susie Rosen-Singleton, Elliot Greenwald, and Diana Sokolow for giving frame and structure to the conversation today. Thanks to the commission meeting room staff and to our interpreters, we would not have been able to pull off this event without you. And many thanks to all of today's panelists for being so generous with their time and with their ideas and with their expertise. It's been a very interesting afternoon and of benefit to all of us. The discussions we engaged in today were informative and important, but we hope they're just the beginning and that we can continue to work together to enhance accessibility of online video programming. As a reminder, a recording of today's forum will be available on the Commission's website, and it will also be made a part of 2 open dockets. The IP closed captioning docket, which is MB 11-154, and the docket we opened in April, seeking an update on the Commission's fulfillment of the CVAA. That's general number 21-140. Both of those dockets remain open, and the public may file ex parte comments. With that, we will conclude today's forum. Thank you very much for your time and attention, and we look forward to talking with you again. Bye.